All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys, the latest update from Martin Fitzwater, now just days away from competing in the New York Pro this weekend. Now, we've gotten several updates from Martin, two of them being today. This first update actually recorded in Bev's gym in New York. Now, the main pose that he hits here is one of my favorite poses of Martin's, his front double bicep, which I think really shows off how small his waist is and how great of a taper he has. Now, the one thing that I would, when I look at Martin posing here, trying to pick apart his physique, trying to find something that he should work on, I would say like the mid to lower lats, like even in the front double bicep where he's got this crazy V taper, I'd like to see a little bit more roundness to that lower lat when he hits the front double, so it looks like more of a pronounced taper than it is. And other than that, really just add overall size, because I think the comparisons with Nick Walker, while Martin looked more conditioned and he looks more aesthetic, the important thing to remember about Nick is he's just overwhelmingly muscular. So while Martin might have a more aesthetically pleasing physique, he might even come in a little bit sharper than Nick. Nick just has this overwhelming amount of mass that Martin just doesn't have. But really, when I try to look at Martin's physique to pick apart a weak point, there's no real glaring weak points. He needs a little bit more size overall. But I'm curious to see how he does here, because while everybody thinks Nick Walker is going to be the hands-down winner, what nobody really seems to be able to decide on is who's going to be the guy in this lineup that's able to push Nick the most. Is it going to be Martin? Is it going to be Tonio Burton, who is the next highest Open Olympia placer with 8th place in 2023? Is it going to be Calderone, who's a top 3 212 Olympian? So while, yes, I would agree that Nick is the front runner still in this lineup, what no one really seems to be able to agree on is which guy in this lineup, if there's a top 2 call-out of Nick and somebody else, who is that guy going to be? Could it be Martin? I think it could. But then I look at so many of these other guys in this lineup, and I think it could be any of them. Like, this is going to be such an interesting show, because while, yes, I think a lot of us are expecting Nick to be the front runner, who's the guy that pushes him the most is the question that I'm the most excited to see answered. And then if there is a chance that Nick gets beaten, which one of these guys is going to do it, because all their physiques are so different. But that's the thing to remember here. As great of a physique as Martin has, Nick is just overwhelmingly big. So I think if anybody beats Nick, whether it's Martin or anybody else, it's going to have to be a combination of things. I think Nick is going to need to be off. And I think if someone does beat him, they have to be overwhelmingly conditioned. And speaking of conditioning, I want to give some credit to another guy that we just found out for sure is doing the New York Pro, Justin Rodriguez. And when we're talking about conditioning, I've got to give him some credit here in these past couple of pictures. Even though the lighting is phenomenal, he definitely found the best goon light to take these pictures. Justin honestly looks peeled to the bone. In that side profile shot, that side chest right there, the striations in his glutes, the vascularity in his legs, the deep striations in his shoulders, he looks dry to the bone in these updates. And he's a guy that we really haven't talked about much at all, because we've seen some of these guys that are compete so much more recently, like Martin, like Tonio, who we're going to talk about in a minute. So is there a chance that Justin could put it together and be a top 2, top 3 guy here? He's been in that conversation before. In fact, the Arnold Classic, where he did the best and then slipped at finals, was the Arnold Classic that Nick Walker actually won. And I don't think we've really seen Justin back to that Arnold Classic level of conditioning that he had in, I believe that was 2021. But I think after that Arnold, Justin just did so many shows and burnt his physique out, and we just haven't really seen him back to that level. But if he is able to get back to that level, could he be one of the guys that rises to the top of this lineup here? I think, it's entirely possible. And I just got to say, looking at that side chest, that looks like some impressive conditioning in that update. Now, next up in the news, physique update from Tonio Burton. This was 1 day ago. This is the latest update that we've gotten from Tonio, one of the guys that we were not able to see at the Pittsburgh Pro guest posing that a lot of people are talking about as being one of the potential frontrunners in this lineup after a second place placing at the Arnold Classic Brazil to none other than Rafael Brandao. And after an 8th place placing at the 2023 Mr. Olympia, and actually the defending champion from last year, he's last year's New York Pro Champion. On paper, and looking at recent contest history, there's a lot of reason to believe that Tonio is going to be the guy that's going to push Nick the most. And very early on in this New York Pro conversation, Tonio and Nick were, I believe, the first 2 guys to announce they were even doing the show. So for a while, we were only talking about Tonio and Nick, and maybe now that we get to the show, maybe on the day of competition, that would be your top 2. But again, when you talk about the difference between Nick and Tonio, it's the same as the difference between Nick and Martin. There's an overwhelming size difference between the two. Nick is just crazy muscular. Although Tonio might be more aesthetic, he might have a better flow and shape to his physique. Maybe he even comes in with tighter conditioning. Nick has an overwhelming amount of muscle. So I'm very curious to see, is there a chance that Nick comes in off? Could somebody catch him that's smaller but more conditioned and then kind of exposes some of those weak points like the midsection? These guys like Tonio and Martin, if they come in looking a lot better conditioned than Nick, then you also have these comparisons where their midsections are going to make Nick's look even bigger and make his flow look even worse. And I know a lot of people feel that it's unrealistic that Nick is going to be beaten here, but I think anything is possible. And I wanted to show this picture of Angel Calderone again. I already showed this a couple days ago in a video, but I don't think I gave this specific picture enough attention. This was from a guest posing that he did, and I showed the videos and this picture, but man, this picture of Angel, he's not a small guy. In stature, from a height standpoint, he's short. But he's not a small guy. He really has maximized the smaller frame that he has. So when you're talking about muscle mass, he's got a lot of it on his frame, about as much as he could possibly fit. But if you look at this picture, man, the guy is peeled to the bone. He almost looks like he's competing at this guest posing. And he hasn't posted any new physique updates since this guest posing. So I wanted to reiterate this picture to you guys because I felt like he really did look that impressive. And if anybody is able to catch Nick, I got to keep looking back at how crazy peeled Angel is and how much size he actually has. Because if you didn't know he was like 5'3" or however tall he is, and you're just looking at this picture not knowing his height, you're thinking that guy's got a ton of muscle. And you're thinking that guy's peeled. And that's kind of what I meant, when I talked about Nick at that Pittsburgh Pro guest posing. It looked like he was doing a guest posing. And in some cases, maybe it should. But I think the fact that it was 1 week out, that's why I expected him to be tighter. And when you see Angel at this guest posing, he looks like he's ready to compete. He's like ready to step on stage. And he's 1 week out. That's, I feel like, how he should look. And of course, there's such a thing as peaking too soon, etc. But this is more of what I expected to see from Nick at that Pittsburgh Pro guest posing, looking more like Angel, to where he's like a showstopper. Nick walks out. He's the biggest freak on that stage that's 1 week out. He's the biggest freak on that stage, aside from Andrew Jacked, I guess, because Andrew's technically prepping for the Texas show. But as far as a freak that's prepping for a show, Nick would be the guy at 1 week out that's supposed to step out and just all eyes on him at that guest posing. And I just didn't feel like that's what he did. Whereas if he looked like Angel looks at this guest posing, I feel like Nick would have achieved that same effect. But at the same time, I also understand it's just a guest posing. Nick wasn't peaking for that. He's peaking for this. And he's a guy that gets ready really fast at the last minute. But we'll see. I do want to make sure I give a guy like Angel credit, though, because I felt like he was extraordinarily impressive at that guest posing. And like I said a million times, I think he's going to shock people in New York. Now, another guy, similar to Justin, that we haven't talked about as much in the lead up to this show is Tim Budeshim. He's a guy that's a show-winning bodybuilder. This guy is a guy that does well. And he's also a guy known for bringing insane condition. But he's also not a small dude. For such a conditioned guy, he's a bigger guy. Could he be a guy that disrupts that top three? And what will the top three even be? But I thought this was a really impressive update of him and Ole, who's doing the 212 there. And maybe we do see Nick come in and win this thing relatively easily. Maybe he's miles ahead of everybody else. But I think, like I've been talking about in this video, I think the battle for 2, 3, 4, those placings, even if they're not pushing Nick as much as they're pushing each other, I think this is going to be a crazy competitive lineup where you're going to see guys really fighting it out for these placings. And whether they push Nick or not, whether Nick wins or not, I think this is going to be just a great bodybuilding battle. There's a lot of dudes in this lineup that look like they're just really bringing it. And even still, in this video, we didn't mention everybody. Quint Beastwood, Beef Stew, Emir Omaragic, Milan Sadik. These are all guys that are also doing the show, all guys that are capable of winning a show. And I saw someone make a great point in the comments. Someone said, I think we should give a little bit more respect to Tonio Burton and respect the fact that he's the current New York Pro Champion. He's the guy that needs to be beaten. So it's kind of crazy that everyone has already given the title to Nick, essentially, when Tonio's the guy that's got to be knocked out. So anything could happen here. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What's your top 3, top 5, whatever predictions for the New York Pro? Who do you think is going to win? Let me know down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NICKS&P, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.